done, old girl. Although we appear not to have landed at the Quick Fit Vehicle Repair Center. Never mind. The TARDIS shock absorber repairs will have to wait. Hello, I'm the doctor, but then again, you probably knew that. Would you like a jelly baby? Go on, they're very good. You're probably wondering why I've avoided Earth these last few years. 2 words, speed cameras. But you're here to watch my story. That is excellent, so am I. When you've lived as long as I have and battled the forces of evil across the universe, one can become a little forgetful. Come, there isn't much time, and a great deal to learn.
I remember the very first episode that went out on the 23rd of November, 1963.
The very first episode went out the day after Kennedy was assassinated.
I was a law student living in a flat in Lancaster Gate in London, and I'd been out, and I came back, and my 4 or 5 flatmates had just turned the television on and were watching this. The credits were coming up. And I can remember very clearly a kind of almost an eidetic image of coming in the door, leaning on the banister, which was just inside the door, and I was actually still there 25 minutes later. I hadn't moved.
What, it's a police box? What on earth's he doing here? I mean, these things are usually on the street. Look, feel it. Feel it, you feel it?
It's a faint vibration.
It's alive!
You had this little girl in this case, and the teacher was involved, I think, at school. And, and you were at school, so the whole idea of someone coming along mysteriously and taking you off in a telephone box, the police call box, to space was fantastic.
I believe these people are known to you.
They're 2 of my school teachers. What are you doing here? Where are we?
They must have followed you. That ridiculous school. I knew something like this would happen.
There was a frisson of excitement. The media seemed to sense this was something very, very new and very exciting.
Susan, listen to me. Can't you see that all this is an illusion?
The whole story was just mesmerising. And I remember seeing it and thinking, hey, this is fantastic.
I was born in another time, another world.
Now, look here, Susan, you... Oh, come on, Barbara. Let's get out of here.
I had been working at ABC Television as a production assistant in the drama department, the head of which was a man called Sidney Newman, who went to the BBC as head of drama and phoned me one day out of the blue and asked me if what I knew about children, and I said nothing.
Verity, of course, Verity Lambert, was absolutely amazing. Not the least for the fact that she was a most wonderfully talented person, but she was a most wonderfully talented young female person.
Doctor Who was a really wonderful programme to work on because it had a format, but it was such a flexible format, you could do almost anything you wanted.
It's all very interesting. Yes, that's very, 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 very interesting.
Doctor Who himself as a character was an enigma, really.
Have you ever thought what it's like to be wanderers in the 4th dimension? Have you?
The basic character of the Doctor is that he's a hero. He's an old-fashioned, honourable hero.
When I say run, run.
It's the classic Lone Ranger, Sir Lancelot. It's the man who rides into your village, rights all the wrongs and disappears, and you don't know a huge amount more about him afterwards, but you know he's a thoroughly decent chap and he's on your side.
Run!
To me, you're kind of anti-hero. In a way, I mean, he's the hero, but he's not the hero he's not a gun-toting sort of guy at all.
Arun, 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 Arun. He's mysterious, and we absolutely adore mysteries, especially benevolent, mysterious people.
Well, I must say you seem quite partial to all Venusian lullabies.
He always tries for a peaceful resolution to any problem, but he never does it, otherwise you get a boring show, but he does try.
I command it! There will be no battle here!
Unlike so many science fiction heroes,
They're all dead, you know.
he is flawed. He can make mistakes.
There should have been another way. In a way, like a bit of a god, but he's also, you know, a bit of a, you know, kind of a, you know, frail human being at the same time.
If you add to that the alien quality, which is the fact that this is someone who has 2 hearts, a body temperature of whatever it is, I can never remember, and has been alive for 900 years and can travel through time and space.
Heart speed?
I say, I don't think that could be right.
Both a bit fast, are they?
Well, I don't.
Still, must be patient. A new body's like a new house. Takes a little bit of time to settle in.
There's one sequence in the second story where they're trying to escape. They're in the time of the cavemen, and they're carrying a wounded caveman with them who's slowing them down.
Water.
And the doctor picks up a big rock and wanders thoughtfully up to the wounded caveman.
Let go of me.
What are you doing?
Well,
And it's quite obvious that he's thinking of polishing him off so they can get on with their escape. Now, you never had anything like that afterwards.
you don't expect me to carry him, do you?
Do you want the women to do the job for you?
Oh, very well.
William Hartnell, the first one, actually had a rather darker side than most. He could be very grumpy, very... I mean, I always said Bill Hartnell played him as a grumpy old man because he was a grumpy old man.
Don't call me Doc. Now, do I make myself clear?
What do you think this one?
I got on very well with Bill. I mean, he was a very kind man who had could be quite irascible, basically.
Now, I suggest we take a walk along the beach and try and find a spot where the cliffs run down to sea level.
Yeah, but that could be miles. It'd be much quicker to go up here.
Yes, so possibly it might, but I'm not a mountain goat, and I prefer walking to any day, and I hate climbing.
William Hartnell I absolutely adored as the Doctor. I later found out that all that wonderful kind of doddery acting, eccentric acting that he did, all that sort of wandering around the set was to look at his lines because he hasn't managed to learn them properly. So he had them posted all over the set.
That is the dematerializing control, and that over yonder is the horizontal hold. Up there is the scanner, those are the doors, that is a chair with a panda on it. Sheer poetry, dear boy. Now please stop bothering me.
I remember in one episode, I can't remember what it was, but I was doing some real acting, big gestures, and Bill took me on one side and he said, Peter, he said, you know, television, very small. He said, well, get gestures up here, around your face, because they can't see them if you do big. Now, if you watch Bill, that's what he did all the time. He said, you know?
But that can be very, very dangerous.
Very dangerous indeed.
Our first studio was in a place called Lime Grove, which doesn't exist anymore. And it was so old-fashioned. It didn't even have a lighting console. It had lighting dimmers around the wall.
Wilderness.
The studios used to get terribly, terribly hot. And so sometimes it literally got so hot that the sprinklers would come on and we'd get drowned.
Can you hear it? The sound of water.
Small budgets had been the bugbear of Doctor Who. Never were they enough, and the resources were never enough to do the sort of programme that the audience figures warranted.
We had a budget of £2,000 a half hour. And with that, we had to pay the actors. We had to do all the special effects, which I know people sort of laugh about. But the people who made those had to be so imaginative because they had to make them with very little money. At the end of the first serial, where our ratings were not bad, but they were sort of average, there was a real wobble going around the BBC, so it was crucial that whatever we put on next was very good, and we only had the Dalek serial ready to go. Donald Wilson, who was our head of department, absolutely hated it. He was so adamant that we shouldn't make it, that had we had anything else ready, we would have not made it.
You will move ahead of us and follow my directions.
And of course, there was something about the Daleks which made it an instant success.
The thing about them, I think, is that they are totally bad. If you annoy them or oppose them, they say exterminate and give you a quick blast. And I think this appealed a lot to children.
Exterminate the Doctor! Exterminate the Doctor! Exterminate the Doctor!
I think Doctor Who played a lot on the fears we were growing up with. You know, the Daleks were kind of like fascistic. Those images of tanks in the First World War coming over. A Dalek looks like one of those in a way.
Inside a Dalek is a nasty squiggly thing, and every now and again you can blow one up. And this thing goes, and it's always a great moment.
Daleks had people in them who would move them around the studio.
Inside the Dalek, it was claustrophobic. What we had was a seat, bit of wood across, and the top was put on you. Very heavy, and you would plug in your electrics.
You had inside this headpiece a button for the lights.
Is operating the time machine.
The eye at the top.
We used to tie ourselves in with a rope so that when we moved, the Dalek moved, and you became almost part of it.
Bloody annoying they are when they hit a pebble on the floor and fall over. So you have to do the scene again and again until the Dalek gets it right.
And then we had two or three people over at a desk with microphone, sort of one of those sort of sports-type microphones, and a monitor, and they would be doing the voices for the Daleks.
I cannot see! My vision is impaired! I cannot see!
They were my favourites because they were the children's favourites, you see.
One of the other ingredients in the show's success was the concept of regeneration, of the Doctor regenerating, because normally if an actor decides he doesn't want to do the show anymore, there's no show. At the end of the William Hartnell era, he said, "Oh dear, this old body of mine is getting a bit worn out. It's time I had a new one." And he collapses and reappears as Patrick Troughton.
And it looked amazing that these two faces kind of changed. And then the Doctor sort of emerges saying, oh, this is a strange sort of face.
Remember what he said in the tracking room? Something about this old body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
So he gets himself a new one?
And there we were, and history was being made.
We'll see about that. We'll see about that.
Here we go again.
I wonder where it'll be this time. Yes, I wonder.
If it had been given at that point to an actor who didn't make it different enough and yet the same enough for it to work, it would have foundered at that particular hurdle and disappeared forever. And Patrick was so different from William Hartnell. I mean, that kind of impish cosmic hobo he's been described as.
Someone who's not used to the Earth's atmosphere. Very interesting. Ah, a TV monitor set. Let's see what we can see.
His persona as a Doctor was just so engaging that we all went, oh, that's nice. Old Grumpy's gone, even though we quite liked Old Grumpy. And now we've got this guy that's a bit of fun.
Come on, let's go and join him. Come on, Victoria. You look very nice in that dress, Victoria.
Thank you. Don't you think it's a bit...
A bit short? Oh, I shouldn't worry about that. Look at Jamie's. Hey, I'll have you know that... Oh, aye. Come along. Come along, let's go and see what the others are doing, shall we? Come along.
When Pat came on board, the fun started to happen and the magic started to be made.
Doctor, at last! Right, sit back, let go of me! Let go of me! Let go of me!
Father, you've got him. What are you going to do with him?
You see, come on. Let go. Oh!
He's got my leg! Doctor, come on! Come on! It's no use! Pull! Jim, close the hatch!
It was believable. I mean, Patrick, I always think that you always felt at the end of an episode, if he was trapped, yes, he could actually die that week. He had this sort of wonderful way of being comedic and dramatic.
Excuse me, may I ask a question? Why did you submit yourself to freezing? You don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
The Cybermen scared me because they were vaguely human. They had these horrible mouths that clicked open and just a stream of words would come out.
We will survive. We will survive.
And then they'd shut again. And they were so sort of inhumanly human. I had nightmares about them, and my mum actually stopped me watching for a while.
Full bodysuit, moon boots, the helmet would go on. And the last thing that they would do is the back plate of the helmet was held on with 4 screws.
My army awaits, Doctor!
And you seriously felt the guys screwing these in, and if you leant your head too far back, you actually felt the screws. You knew once you were screwed inside that was it. You get real street cred, having been a Cyberman. That's a huge plus. I suppose the only one bigger than that would be Darth Vader.
To me, the unsung heroes of Doctor Who are those actors and actresses who played, those monsters and creatures from the deep. They worked so hard, and I was always full of admiration for them, and they never seemed to complain. I would have been complaining.
When the sun goes down and the moon comes up, I turn into a teenage Goo-Goo Muff. Yeah, I cruise through the city and I roam the streets, looking for something that is nice to eat. You better duck when I show up.
I've always enjoyed reading the script and the writer saying he will menacingly walk towards the Doctor. I think it's fascinating to menacingly walk in a rubber outfit toward anybody. But the thing you have to remember that inside the suits, we were pulling the menacing faces. We were doing our damnedest inside there to scare you all, and I hope we succeeded.
I remember that I was particularly terrified by the sea devils. And as children, we used to go to the beach for the weekends. And I used to lie in bed thinking, the sea monsters, the sea devils could be coming out of the sea any minute now. I better stay awake in case I hear them.
The director decided that they looked too nude or slightly indecent or something. And he put them in little net dresses. And they look absolutely bloody silly.
Social call?
You admire our technology.
When the Zygons were trying to get in, they whispered. They were always saying, open this door. It worked a treat. Absolute treat.
And fighting monsters is dead easy. Just walk away from them at a brisk pace and you're safe.
You are dead, Doctor.
It had been on for 2 or 3 years with William Hartnell, another 3 years or so with Patrick Troughton, and that's a good life for a television show. You've had 5 reasonably successful years. Audiences were beginning to tail off a bit, and I think there was a feeling, well, OK, it's had a good run, we'll do something else.
You'll need to be angry if you kill me. I'm a genius.
What saved our bacon was that they couldn't think of anything else. They tried various things and none of them seemed to be much good. And so they said, all right, we'll do another year of Doctor Who and see what happens then.
We have noted your particular interest in the planet Earth. The frequency of your visits must have given you special knowledge of that world and its problems.
Yeah, yes, I suppose that's true. Earth seems more vulnerable than others, yes.
We were in the grip of decisions that had been taken, before we really took over. And there were two. One was to have the Doctor exiled to Earth.
In exile?
He will be sent to Earth in the 20th century and will remain there for as long as we deem proper.
Secondly was to have longer serials, 7-parters, rather than 4s and 6s, you see. Neither of which we liked.
Is this some sort of joke? No, I refuse to be treated in... What are you doing? Stop!
John Pertwee became the new Doctor, and the show went into colour.
They got the idea that it was going to be Earth-based, and UNIT was created, the whole idea of this United Nations Intelligence Task Force. And they promoted me to Brigadier, and then I went on with John Pertwee and all the other Doctors.
I love the UNIT stories, and I love, the Brigadier Nick and the whole UNIT team. And any one UNIT story is fine. If you've got to do 4 or 5, one after another, it's very hard to make them different.
Well, that means we're in trouble, doesn't it, sir?
Yes.
For the next season, we made up our minds that we would have as much variety as possible. We'd have Summer on Earth because we loved UNIT and Nick Courtney as the Brigadier and all the rest of it. That was lovely. But we didn't want it every time.
I want to go back to Earth.
But do you realize how long I've been confined to one planet?
All that talk of yours about traveling in time and space, it was true.
Well, of course it was true. Before I was stranded on Earth, I spent all my time exploring new worlds and seeking the wonders of the universe.
But you don't know what's out there.
Then let's find out.
Of course, there are certain elements of Doctor Who that are absolutely sacred and can't be tampered with. First and foremost, the TARDIS.
TARDIS stands for Time and Relative Dimension in Space, which I'm sure you know. Sure everyone knows.
A thing that looks like a police box standing in a junkyard. It can move anywhere in time and space?
Yes.
Quite so. But that's ridiculous.
It's a wonderful device for making stories.
I remember registering that, well, it didn't look like a ship. It was very small. I must have been delirious.
I don't suppose you were. It is very small outside. It's just in here it's big.
Oh, come off it.
My only reservations about the TARDIS was I thought that it should have been much bigger on the inside. It should have been a whole world, really. And it could have been then anything we want, inside of cathedrals. It could have been Kew Gardens or anything.
I don't think anyone's ever discovered a loo on there, but...
In my imagination, it's this fantastic place with all the best hotels you've ever been to, all the best rooms. Of course, in reality, it was quite different.
It's probably about one of the most rickety old things I've ever seen in my whole life.
Sometimes you have these scenes where 4 or 5 of you have to come out of the TARDIS, and if you didn't know them well before the scene, you certainly do afterwards.
And the other thing, of course, was the noise.
I took my mother's front door key and I put it down the bass strings of an old piano we had. We took the sound, we speeded it up, we slowed it down, we cut them together. And it became one of the great icons of sound effects.
I don't know whether they expected John to do what John did.
I got lost in the time vortex.
But of all the characterizations of the Doctor, he was arguably the most serious.
Look, if you cannot reverse the energy drain, the fabric of the entire universe could be torn apart.
John Pertwee was definitely a much more straightforward establishment figure, and for me just didn't have the sort of quirkiness.
Doctor, what on earth's going on?
Thank you, Brigadier, for that timely intervention.
Who is that creature?
Yes, well, I'll explain about him later. Excuse me, old chap.
He didn't like scientific gobbledygook, lines with things like multiphasing image banks or something. He tended to stumble over that, and he would always grumble about them, you see. And one day I was in rehearsal, and John called me over and said, this line here, Terence, he said, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. And I said, oh, well, I suppose it is a bit of a tongue twister, do you want me to try and simplify it for you? And he said, no, I like it, he said.
You see, before you reactivated it, I reversed the polarity of the neutron flow.
So we used to work it in after that to please him,
Well, I've reversed the polarity of the neutron flow, so the TARDIS should be free of the force field now.
Doctor, what are you doing?
I'm reversing the polarity of my ultrasonic screwdriver's power source.
John adored his clothes, so he was the dandy doctor, the cape, which I think he got the idea from his grandfather.
And indeed, the way his hair was done and all the rest of it. It grew more and more bouffant during the 5 years, because if that was all John, he wanted it like that.
He liked to do all his stunts himself, John, more than I did. I was quite happy to let somebody else do the stunts for me.
Hello, Brigadier. Look, is this thing working? Can you hear me? Over. Loud and clear, Doctor.
And he was a man of daring do. He loved his gadgets, John. The stories abound about him nearly demolishing an entire camera crew when he was driving a hovercraft once.
Hey, you're not going without me!
Right, fasten your seatbelt.
But, Doctor, you'll never catch him. He's airborne.
Stand well back, Brigadier.
John had this Hoomobile built. It featured in Planet of the Spiders. We're filming outside Kingston one day. He said, I'm going in the Hoomobile, Lizzie. I'll call for you and take you. Ha! So you're in this silver Stingray going through peak time traffic in Kingston. You've got people falling off bicycles. In fact, the police came out and said, Doctor, do you think you can, not drive? Could you just be taken on the prop van again?
Doctor, we're flying!
Yes, of course we're flying.
Once upon a time, I conquered outer space, leaving Earth behind for quite a different place. Through the stratosphere, I rocketed and soon I did the cha-cha on the moon. I knew how to get there, but to my surprise...
Another standard ingredient of Doctor Who is the companion. Now, I had a very old-fashioned idea about the female companion, was that basically her role was to scream and get rescued by the Doctor.
If screaming is in the script, screaming you do. But they said they did think it was a bit too much, and it was very frightening for the children.
There's another one!
And my children watching at home with me go off saying, Dad, is Mummy coming home tonight? A little bit worried,
With the growth of feminism, it became impossible to get away with this over the years, and there were indignant demands for stronger, more positive female characters.
Well, I've been checking up into this whole question of time travel.
Well, you should have come to me. I know all about time travel.
I know you know about it, but what I'm interested in, Doctor, is other people who know about it.
Oh, are there any?
Oh, one or two have dabbled.
Oh, fascinating. Because the trouble is the Blinovitch limitation effect. If they could overcome that, they
I
possibly...
think someone has.
I was given my character by Barry Letts, and he wanted someone who would come in, who would ask questions, ask for what they want, be quite feisty.
Well, there's always something you can do. It's just a matter of working out what.
So what they gave me as a tag to be this questioning woman was journalist.
What's happening?
We're asking questions again.
You are there as a vehicle to ask all those questions that the audience want to ask. Why are we doing this, Doctor? Why are we going here? Why is this happening?
Why weren't you blown up?
I'll explain one day. It's a neat trick.
Doctor, what is Soana?
A machine that's become a living creature. An omniscient computer with schizophrenia.
What are you doing?
Telepathic circuits.
John started getting itchy feet. And he said to me, the programme is changing. And he said, I'm getting to the point where I think that I'm not getting offered work because people think I'm Doctor Who and I'm going to be Doctor Who forever. I really think I ought to leave.
If I could leave, I would. If only to get away from people like you.
Doctor?
And your petty obsessions.
And I had to find another Doctor Who. A difficult problem.
The head of department phoned up and said, how's the search going? And Barry said, not too well, And he said, well, there's this chap called Tom Baker.
Would you care for a jelly baby?
He was an interesting actor with a fantastic physical presence. He was tall and large, a wonderful sort of expressive face, and a marvellous voice.
Homo sapiens.
For me, that was one of his most important assets.
Invincible species. It's only a few million years since they crawled up out of the mud and learned to walk. Puny, defenseless bipeds. They've survived flood, famine, and plague. They've survived cosmic wars and holocausts. Now, here they are, out among the stars, waiting to begin a new life, ready to outsit eternity. Doctor Who, when I was playing it, was just Tom Baker. It was the kind of idealized Tom Baker who was totally in control of a situation because I knew the lines.
What is he saying, Doctor? I do not understand.
Can't make ends meet. Probably too many economists in the government.
These taxes, they are like sacrifices to tribal gods?
Well, roughly speaking, but paying tax is more painful.
You have a very proprietal view of the person you cast, which was William Hartnell for me. So I think the nearest for me was Tom Baker, who was very, very eccentric.
Even the sonic screwdriver won't get me out of this one.
When people said I was eccentric, that jolted me slightly. I wasn't aware of being eccentric. I just had a chance, to be an alien.
Are you listening to me, Romana?
Yes, of course I'm listening.
If you're not listening, I can make you listen. Because I can do anything. As from this moment, there's no such thing as free will in the entire universe. There's only my will, because I possess the key to time.
Doctor, are you all right?
Well, of course I'm all right, but suppose I wasn't all right. This thing makes me feel in such a way. I'd be very worried if I felt like that about somebody else feeling like this about that. Do you understand?
I said, Tom, your life is going to change. And he said, oh, do you think so? I said, yes, I don't think you quite realise how. And after the first episode of Robot had gone out on Saturday, 1.5 hour, he said, do you know, he said, people were staring at me in the tube. I said, well, I warned you. And his life did change from that moment on.
I was suddenly famous, and the press were after me, and girls who found me utterly revolting now found me irresistible.
What do you do for an encore, Doctor?
I win.
He was scrupulous about being, a bit like being Santa Claus, being the Doctor in public where children were, and he was terrific, and he loved it.
Hello? How odd. I usually get on terribly well with children.
I must say, I hope nobody will mind, and they can't sack me anymore because I'm not there. Anyway, they'll have to be quick. But I didn't always read the scripts, it was terrible. So I never quite knew what was going on.
Were you trying to attract my attention?
Everyone says to me, where's your scarf? Now, the only doctor that wore a scarf was Tom. But he did it for 7 years out of the nigh on 30 it was on the screen. So there's a huge section of the population who see Tom Baker as the Doctor.
Tom had nagged me to, did he really need an assistant? Did he really need it? Well, you need an assistant because the doctor's got to talk to somebody, and you have to have someone to go and get into trouble so the doctor can find them.
Hello. Hello, did I start?
So suddenly I was confronted, by this feral creature, so very well played by Louise.
No, I'm the Doctor. What's your name?
Leela.
Leela. Would you like a jelly baby?
It's true then.
They say the evil one eats babies.
And suddenly, you know, there was Leela, and she was all woman, you know, not a young girl at all. So I got a bit of a shock. But anyway, it was terrific because the costume designer had really given her a sort of virtually a page 3 girl outfit with a knife and all the rest of it.
I thought I was going into a kiddies' TV programme, you know, stepping into the sort of William Hartnell era. But by this stage, it had sort of moved up a notch. And in a way, Leela caught the crest of a feminist wave with her feistiness and her, you know, being very outspoken and slightly aggressive. And I suppose it's naive of me, but to dress someone in a leather leotard and put them on after the football results, inevitably there's going to be a lot of male interest, which I absolutely was not expecting.
That wasn't necessary. Who licensed you to slaughter people? No more gin as thorns, you understand? Ever.
I loved all the violence, as long as it wasn't the violence that was recognisable.
Now drop your weapons, or I'll kill him with this deadly jelly baby.
Kill him then.
What?
Kill him then.
I don't take orders from anyone. Take me to your leader.
One of the problems we had all the time was the level of violence.
I just do not buy the connection between screen violence and violence in society.
Do you have any last declaration?
I think it's a feeble excuse for the failings of society. It never bothered me at the time, I must admit. Call me irresponsible, it did not bother me.
There's got to be violence because it's an action-adventure show and your villains have got to be fighting. They've got to kill people, you know, they've got to be malevolent.
No, I will not tolerate his insults.
But it's a question of how you do it, you know, of treatment. Occasionally we would go over the line and get into trouble.
What's this thing doing over here?
The boy's attitude, I can't...
We had a troll doll, a plastic troll doll, which was used by the villain to assassinate people. And under the influence of heat, it came to life and set about people, you see. It was always an ugly doll. We didn't try and make it cute and thought we might get away with that, but apparently children all over the country were refusing to take their teddy bears to bed because they feared they would grow fangs in the night and attack them.
John, are you all right? John?
But on the other hand, the viewing figures were going up all the time, so it wasn't all that serious, you know.
Kids like being scared. You know, why do we still like horror movies, you know? The number of people that say to me, oh, I watched it from behind the sofa. But the fact is they watched it.
Most shows were a mixture of terrific visual effects. And then there'd be maybe a quarter of the show where the effects didn't work.
I love the cheapness of it.
The costume that was built for the Wirren, which was like a sort of big green caterpillar, and there was this brilliant new material called bubble wrap. So this poor artist dressed in this costume like a sort of great condom, actually. Everywhere he crawled, because the floor was expanded metal, these things started to burst. And he was accompanied by this terrible lavatorial sound everywhere he went.
Suddenly, the level of reality would drop if an effect didn't work, and you know, my heart would be in my mouth. I thought, oh, how can we salvage that? But we did the best we could.
Boy, fetch it!
I began to realize that I was not much fun to work with from the point of view of the producers, because I got very, very opinionated. I thought that I knew what worked. It meant, you know, that I was quite difficult to deal with.
You know, Kenine, sometimes I think I'm wasted just rushing around the universe saving planets from destruction. With a talent like mine, I might have been a great slow bowler.
And so when I offered my resignation, I was quite astounded at how swiftly it was accepted.
It's the end. But the moment has been prepared for.
There was a character that was meant to turn out to be me or the Doctor's next regeneration. And I forget now after all these years whether he was called the Watcher or the Lurker. It was something bizarre like that. And it was all sort of, it looked like he was mummified. It had to go from Tom into Tom with a white face, into some other person with more of a white face, and then slowly into me, dissolving into me. And that was the beginning of me as the Doctor.
After Tom, Peter, the perfect change after someone as strong and vivid and alien, in a sense, as Tom. You've got Peter, who instantly young people could identify with.
I mean, I thought I was very wrong for it.
That's the trouble with regeneration. You never quite know what you're going to get.
I couldn't imagine me watching myself playing the Doctor, really. But you know, once I started on it, as you do, you know, you find your way into it. We came up with this idea of my outfit being sort of based on a cricketing outfit. And I do like cricket, and I'm not good at cricket, but I'm not terrible either. And we had this sequence in which I was playing in a match. And the idea was I had to bowl this person out. Well, now the chances of doing that in reality are fairly slim. And I actually did run up, I bowled the ball, and I bowled him out. Which was a bigger thrill for me than anything in the entire series. It's actually on camera. You will see me bowl this person out. Brilliant.
Ripping performance, old boy. Come up to the house and meet the Major.
I inherited 3 companions, and I was only allowed to put my arm around the male companion. Wasn't allowed to put my arm around the female companion in case people thought there was hanky-panky going on in the TARDIS.
This way, come on.
My 2 female companions were covered from head to foot.
The 0 room door, I heard it slam.
And the next season, they miraculously lost most of their clothes. There are some absurdities in the stories that you're doing, and some very funny dialogue sometimes, and you know, you are talking face to face with a giant rubber monster, and you have to kind of get that laughter out of your system, otherwise you just won't be able to get through the studio days. And that was sometimes difficult, because I've always been a bit of a giggler if things start to go wrong, and if you've ever been in that position, things just get worse. And the only way I could ever stop myself, before I was doing Doctor Who as well, ironically, was to remember a scene from Doctor Who when I was young, of them going into a cave, I think on the moon, I've no idea what story it was, and seeing these figures behind iced over figures. And it was so frightening at the time that it would always bring on that same memory when I remembered it while I was laughing, and immediately I'd stop. What's quite interesting about the guest stars that come into Doctor Who is that they were very, very experienced and well-established actors, a lot of them. But many of them said the only time they got credibility from their family was for doing Doctor Who.
Why are you doing this?
The race? As a diversion.
And the crews for the ships, you collected them from their different time zones just as a diversion too?
They are ephemerals.
Ephemerals?
Beings like yourself.
And since it has no call to be here, the art lies in the fact that it is here.
It wasn't easy, but not
absolutely exquisite.
When Peter was playing the Doctor, I got a telephone call from my then agent saying that I'd been offered a part in Doctor Who and that it fitted perfectly within the schedule of work that I was about to do.
Got to come with us, Doctor.
But I remember saying to him, "Oh dear, I think that means I'll never be Doctor Who." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I read somewhere that they've never cast the Doctor from within the existing cast of the show. So if you've been in it before, you don't get to play Doctor Who." I turned up and played Maxil in Arc of Infinity.
The compound is guarded. If you try to leave again, my men will shoot to kill. See that the Doctor knows.
I got to shoot Peter Davison. It was a Doctor. Good way to get his job, really, isn't it?
Hello. I'm the Doctor.
Doctor!
It was within a year. John Nathan Turner, who was the then producer,
Take them away.
rang me up, asked me to come and see him because he thought of me to play the part.
Much as I love Colin, you always feel a bit bitter about the person who's taken over from you. Because you suddenly have maybe just the very last doubt, should I actually have left? Maybe I'll change my mind. And also it's, there was more acting to do because I was my life was running out and I was running down and I was going to regenerate.
Is this death?
And when I watched it back, all I remember seeing is Nicola Bryant's cleavage bending over me.
Perry.
I think that's all anyone saw. And the camera was very cleverly just right down there. When I was doing my best acting, no one ever saw it.
Doctor?
You're expecting someone else?
I...
That's 3 eyes in one breath. Makes you sound a rather egotistical young lady.
Colin is a big, powerful chap. He's a big, strong chap. He's a great bull of a man, And although he's actually terribly nice, he's slightly intimidating when you first meet him. You know he's there.
You don't even know what a Peary is, do you?
I just kind of wanted every opportunity I could to put the audience on the back foot, really.
A Peary is a good and beautiful fairy in Persian mythology. The interesting thing is, before it became good, it was evil.
When I took over, I was able to do that because the regeneration phased the Doctor, so he behaved quite badly.
And that's what you are. Thoroughly evil.
Doctor, stop it!
The first couple of stories, people didn't like my Doctor. And the game plan was over the many, many, many years I'd be playing the part to unpeel the layers so we learn more about this character. The good thing about my costume was I was the one person who didn't have to look at it. I've never really understood why the Doctor has to wear the same thing throughout. Because all Doctors do that. They might change slightly, but presumably there's a very swift laundrette on the TARDIS. Otherwise, he's a very smelly man.
Oh, yes, I will wear the mantle of power. So handsomely.
In Vengeance on Varos, there was the wonderful Syl.
Gently! Take extreme care with my person if you wish to retain your skins.
He was someone that I wanted to make sure would scare the children so that instead of sitting on the sofas, they were back behind the sofas where they belonged. That was my ambition.
Are they really disturbing, these videos you said?
I remember at the read-through, the simple instruction said, Syl laughs. And he laughed. I can't do it. Nobody can do it except Nabil. And we all burst into spontaneous applause because it was such a repellent, luxuriating, slimy laugh.
Actually, I think that I should get royalties from Anthony Hopkins because I'm absolutely convinced that he nicked from Syl the laugh with his Hannibal Lecter.
That is enterprising.
My first series was 25 minutes. The second series, they decided to double the length. So instead of 4 half-hour episodes, it was 2 50-minuters, which meant that there was only one cliffhanger in the whole story, which affected the whole shape of it. And they shifted the schedule and they moved it to Mondays, they moved it back to Saturday. My first season I was up against the A-Team on ITV, because by that time ITV was doing anything to shake Doctor Who out of the ratings.
Well, I know perfectly well what category of disaster has befallen us.
Then Michael Gray joined the BBC. He was on record before he joined the BBC of saying he didn't like Doctor Who, so he wasn't inconsistent when he promptly axed it. He was probably unprepared for the reaction, which was tabloid headlines. I had a phone call from John Nathan Turner, by that time a good friend, saying, I've got bad news and good news. I said, well, give us the good news first. He said, well, the programme is coming back next year. What's the bad news? Well, Michael Gray has said we have to find a new doctor. He thinks that 3 years for each doctor is about the right length of time, which is a bit of a body blow. Because I declined to do the regeneration on the terms the BBC was then offering me, this poor old Sylvester had to get inside my costume and put a blonde wig on and lie on the floor and have Kate O'Mara do unspeakable things to him. Well, lucky myself.
That's the man I want. Take him to my laboratory.
And it wasn't me. I've never seen it. I ought to sometime.
So they had to put me in his costume. They lost me for 3 days because he's a big fella. People always said to me, you know, you'd make a really good Doctor Who. So it was from there, it came from without, really, rather than within. I thought, really? I also, I'm a scarf person. I wore scarves before Doctor Who, you know, and so, I mean, I think also, you know, I thought, wow, you know, me and scarves are very good.
Hi, darling! Me, the Doctor! What's the matter? Don't you recognise your mortal enemy?
Doctor!
I thought the companion should be more involved with the stories and the adventure than some of the others were.
Ace, you said 10 seconds.
Nobody's perfect, Professor.
The character, you know, of Ace was just such a wonderful character. The streetwise kid.
Small human female sighted on level 3.
What are you calling small?
We did a lot of our own stunts, most of our own stunts actually, and we sort of had a competition as to see who could do the most dangerous and daring stunts. Didn't realise that they were probably just saving money. I was meant to be doing that end of episode thing with, you know, holding my face up to the glass and, Doctor, Doctor, and... Doctor!
And suddenly it's glass, this tank, and I noticed it bulge. And I thought, that's glass, it shouldn't bulge. It's dangerous.
Get it out!
The tank burst. All the water poured out. I ran for some wooden stairs and shouted, switch off the electricity. And for a minute, I was no longer playing a superhero. I was one, and I'd saved the day.
Get it out! Move back, the water will suddenly... Everybody get back! Move back! Get the pump in! Get the pump in!
We were filming in Dorset, in the deserts of Dorset. The power of the Ragnarok had been destroyed by me. And this power was going to manifest itself in a great wind that would blow out the tent as I walked past. And that would be its dying gasp. We have to do it. It's coming to the end. The light's going. It must be done. There's no way it can be done again. Too expensive. Blah. Oh, action. I walk past the tent. The whole world explodes. The whole thing goes completely bananas. Flames fly out, and I just know, I've got to keep going. I've no idea whether I have any clothes at the back, because the heat, the searing heat, I don't know if I had any hair left, skin, who knows, but I knew the front was still there, and I kept on walking. And as and then suddenly this huge smoke enveloped me, and that was it. I heard in the dark gloom, cut, rap, and applause, and that was it. And then it blown me out sky high. I mean, but they're always doing that. And they came around and they went, oops, a bit more than we had thought. I met this Doctor Who fan once, and he was so excited, and he said, "Oh, I'm such a big fan, and look, I've got these 25 books. Could you sign them? I've got, all these postcards. I've got, this T-shirt and my broken arm and all that. Sign all these things. Oh, Doctor Who's my favourite programme, and you're my 5th favourite Doctor." And it was like. And he did it with such, it was in that way, and it was just, I thought, oh, God love the man. I'm glad at least I'm not his 7th.
I'm disappointed in you, Doctor. I expected you to choose your friends more carefully. Still, she won't be a friend much longer, will she?
Well, I have a sort of view about the way Doctor Who went.
That red-hot poker could cut through you like a knife through butterscotch.
I have to bow, however reluctantly, to your logic, which leaves me only one alternative.
I would watch it and think nobody's really believing what they're doing here. They just think it's all rather funny and they're rather smart and clever, and I just didn't... It didn't work for me, I'm afraid.
Big Ace! Open the oven door!
They decided to put us up against Coronation Street, and we were not advertised at all when we came back for that season. We kind of snuck in. Suddenly we were on, and I had friends who didn't even know we were back on. So I think there was a desire to get rid of it then, up above, somewhere up there, and for whatever reason. But we were kind of ignorant of that because, you've got to be an optimist, and we were taking all the positive things that were coming back. And so it was a bit of a surprise when I was told it wasn't carrying on.
I was really sad, and so was Sylvester, because I would have loved to have had the chance to round the character off, to have seen what happened to Ace, really.
Mine, I believe. Thank you. It was very sad, and it also frustrating because, I had a real feeling, that we're going to hit gold. Paid dirt. It was the next. We're just there. And where to now, Ace?
Home.
Home?
The TARDIS.
Yes, the TARDIS. We will always be Doctor Who, all of us, who've ever played it. We never can get rid of it. And so therefore one either tries and fights it and goes mad or embraces it and enjoys it. Enjoy it.
I am immortal for the people who will look at Doctor Who in generations to come. That's nice, that,
I hear my little boy making up his own Doctor Who stories now, with Dr. Daddy in the leading role. It's great.
I feel sad that my daughters, who range from 11 to 18, are that precise generation that was deprived of their own Doctor and the back of their sofa. We now hear that in a couple of years' time there's going to be a new one, and I'm quite excited as a viewer, as a father, as an audience member who remembers the tradition.
Best time of my life,
The memories. If you're a digital viewer, press your red button now to transport yourself to another dimension with BBC I and the new animated series of Doctor Who, starring Richard E. Grant. Next up tonight here on BBC One, all roads lead to Scotland. EastEnders.